Yeah, you're kind of.
Right. Welcome to Disruptive Bytes, which is sessions, lunchtime sessions that we try to organize possibly once or twice a month, where we talk about different topics, different issues, and it's like a discussion more in an informal sort of setup. So, and today we are going to talk about certification, and we'll also talk about game-based learning, gamification, serious games. And we have three speakers who are going to speak for about 10 minutes each, and we can have questions and answers at the end of the three talks. So the first speaker is António, who is actually from University of Porto and in Nestec, and he's working in one of the projects that we have we are leading from Coventry University, which is called Beaconing. And this project is actually trying to achieve and trying to support anytime, anywhere learning by using pervasive, context-aware, and gamified techniques and technologies. And what we're trying to do is to support learners within K-12 as well as vocational in trying to support their STEM education and try to connect learning that you facilitate within a classroom setting into the outdoor as well as into social and personal space. So this session today is supported and hosted by the Beaconing Project at the Disruptive Media Learning Lab. And the second speaker today is Helen, who is actually based in Totem Learning, and she's going to talk about the fantastic work that they are doing in serious gaming. And the third speaker will be Samantha, who is a researcher at the lab, who is actually involved in creating new hybrid approach in supporting learning by using game-based techniques. I'm pretty sure that they will introduce themselves and the different work that they are doing in the area. And those of you who are online, welcome, and I'm sure that you will watch this on our YouTube channels, where we have different videos of the different sessions that we have had for the past 2 years. So I would like to invite our first speaker.
Thank you very much. Hello. So thank you very much, Sylvester, for inviting me to this talk, and thank you all for this opportunity to talk to you. And my name is António Coelho. I'm representing you a research project on certification in games-based training. I'm from Portugal. Portugal is this small country in the southwest of Europe, but actually is bigger than it seems. It's actually one of the largest, if you count on the maritime territory that we have in our responsibility. So it's one of the largest countries in Europe, and also the only one with the same time schedule as England. And I come from Porto, which is in the north of the country, in the sea coast. I'm an associate professor at the University of Porto. It's the largest university in the north of Portugal, as the highest rank also in the north of Portugal. It's about 3,000 students and 2,000 teachers and researchers. We have also a very international set of students and faculty coming to Portugal and Porto University. We have about 3,000 students, which is about 10% of our students. And I'm also a researcher at Nestec, which is a private institute, non-profit institute, whose mission is to bring the academic research towards the industry and the business world. So in this presentation, I'll talk about motivation for certification in training. We'll also talk about serious games for training and the relation between game brain changes and competence, and introduce you the Triadic certification approach. But this is part of a PhD student's work in certification for games-based training. So the motivation is that all people that go to professional activities, they require competencies, different competencies depending on what they want to do. Of course, the best way for them to do it is training. training leads up to the competencies we want or need. But of course, if you want to go to business, you have to, the ones who are going to hire you need to have to be assured that you have those competencies. And then that requires certification. So if you are certified, you are easier to get a job afterwards. By using serious games, certification is also a very good thing, because you then, after you use the serious game for learning or training, if you are certified, you will be able to have a better position in jobs as well. So we believe that the certification in serious games should be done in-game. So as the game is able to get analytics, and so it should be able to provide certification as well. So by definition, a competency is the capacity to apply or use a set of related knowledge, skills, and abilities required to successfully perform a desired task. And so if we need an assessment tool for these competencies, there are several. We choose the educational competency wheel, which basically defines different kinds of competence you can achieve. Those that are developing with others, organizational skills, courage, results, so different skills, both in hard skills and soft skills. So based on these skills, we try to design a method to design games, serious games for training that could be certified. Of course, when designing a serious game, you can use different kind of game genres. So which one will be better? An action game, strategy game? Well, that depends on the competencies. So our approach is first to analyze, of course, the situations and scenarios on certification. Know what tasks are you required, the training scenarios, the goals, the outcomes, and the contextual activities and tasks, depending on the training. Secondly, you should identify the competencies. For that kind of activities, what kind of competence should the learner achieve? This, of course, is an iterative process. It requires defining, and also sometimes in some training activities, you have some legislation that defines these competencies as well. So, but you should identify clearly the competence and also the proficient level you need. So, for each competency, for instance, if you want to take a driver's license, you have to park your car. So, in which size that the car should be available? There's some benchmarks or proficiency levels you have to attain. Third, you should define the mechanics or the game genres for your serious game. And that's where we made a study also to try to see which one can we propose for each kind of competency. And lastly, to develop the serious game, the game design document, and etc. So for the third phase, we try to achieve, is there a relationship between specific competencies and game genres? So we made this study looking at other solutions. We analyzed a lot of games, about 100. And we tried to check which was the main game genre for those games and which kind of competencies they intended to evaluate or train. So the result was something like this. You can have it online on that address, but I can share it as well. But basically, this study shows on the left, we have the game genres, and on the top, we have the competencies. For instance, if you want to build effective teams, most of the games designers have chosen first shooter action games in first or third person, mostly shooter games. So that's one of the game genres that you can use for building effective teams. But of course, this kind of genre has also been used here. So also for integrity and trust or interpersonal skills. So you can have, from these metrics, you can have a first decision of what kind of game genre you should select. And after that, after you design the game genre, you should go for the design of the game. Well, for that, we made an approach based on the Triadic game design, which is an approach for designing serious games that integrates three areas: reality, meaning, and play. So this was proposed by Harteveld in 2011, and this is the basis for what we propose for the assessment, which is the Triadic certification approach. But basically, the authoring tool should be able to provide these interrelationships. So on the left, we designed the competencies and the different proficiency levels, different for each competencies. And then we match with the design, with the game design on top. So we have different mechanics, and we select for this competency, I will use that mechanics. For that level of competency, I'll use that for the distinct levels of the game. So within this framework, we can create the game design and be sure that our game addresses all competencies and all proficiency levels at each level of progression. We've been using it on some case studies. So one of those was for the tourist guide certification. So we defined the operational skills: planning, organizing, time management, organizational skills, written communications, presentation skills, the results, action-oriented, and some strategic skills: decision quality and problem solving, technical learning, strategic agility and innovation. These are the skills, the competencies required for a tourist guide. And so, based on that, we defined the game design. So, for instance, the tour guide should know the location where he is. So, we define different game mechanics to find places. Then the heritage area, know about heritage. And of course, planning itinerary. So we define the different mechanics on this framework to address then a location-based game for the tourist to make the training. So we will be on the city with a location-based game, and as this challenge is when he needs to know how to plan a tour and how to know something about the history of the monuments and so on. So this location-based game will allow for him to train and be assessed on the competencies and be certified for that. So these kind of tools can be used not only in formal education, but informal education. If you want to train people that are citizens that want to help others, for instance, in big events in some cities, you can use this kind of tools. Certifying people. And now there are some programs about that citizens that are able to make some tools. Another case study we used this approach was in the Icarus Project. It was the FP7 project. Basically, this project was to develop robotic autonomous systems for search, and rescue in catastrophe situations. Basically, in the disruptive catastrophe, we have robots helping the search and rescue teams, both in air, water, and land. And what we developed was a simulator and a serious game training. So this simulator is able to perform training on the search and rescue team. So search and rescue teams should be able to operate these vehicles. This is a sea trial that we developed, and so they need to be certified. So we developed this serious game based on Unity to certify the operators to easily create the missions for both UAVs, USVs, and UGVs. This simulator uses the same platform for controlling in the game as well as in reality. And also in this training, we can use both real vehicles and virtual vehicles. For instance, if you are not near the sea, you can use the UAV and still control the sea vehicles virtually. So it is able to operate them together. I think I'm on time, so quickly. So that was the control unit that we trained. So we believe that certification is clearly relevant to a marketplace success and acceptance. So we want to use serious games, but we have to have something that credits that our companies have in the shift. Serious games should include in-game assessment in order to provide the assessment and certification. And we have some case studies in tourism guide, search and rescue, and also we are providing also some training on driver's license. So the ideal is that you can get a driver's license without having a car, but using a simulator and a serious game can achieve you the technical competencies on that. So future work, we have this keeping up the study offering tool. We are to develop the offering tool for this approach. Adaptive training and certification, also very interesting thing. And study on specific areas as formal education and health. Just to finalize, in terms of trends for the future, we want to integrate also multimodal and multi-sensory virtual environments. So in some training, you should be able to also smell and taste and feel your skin, the heat and the wind, the voice of firemen and so on. So we want to include multi-sensory environments. And also, we are using also mixed reality for having training and control rooms with field operators in the field, working in different activities and having a virtual with mixed reality metaphor for communication. This is other trends for the future. And thank you very much. And I'll be able to have questions at the end if you want. And this is a picture of Porto, so go there.
Thank you very much. And we are going to have questions and answers after the third speaker, so we can have possibly about 10 to 20 minutes at the end. But, second speaker is Helen, Routledge from Totem Learning.
Okay, hi everybody. So I'm Helen Routledge, I'm Head of Design and Production at Totem Learning, and we are a commercial serious game developer, primarily for the corporate market, but also for the education sector. My personal passion in life is to make learning more effective, to make it more sticky, and I don't want to sound like an extra from The Walking Dead, but I really love brains, and that's what really motivates me in life. So games and learning, we all know that games and learning, game design is about making people do stuff, making people act in a certain way in your game. But when we look at certification and when we look at behavior in terms of serious games, we need to make sure that our players are doing the right things to move forward and to educate themselves to benefit either their education career or their corporate career or whatever training sector we're looking at. So to do that, to make them effective learning tools, we need to be able to identify skills that are used in the game, to track improvement through that game, and to support their overall learning journey. Because I think a mistake that many designers make is that they look at the game as an isolated learning event rather than the overall learning journey that a user is going to go on. So I just wanted to talk about a few things that we do at Totem Learning and a few products that we've developed that particularly focus on gathering content, gathering certification, and giving the user some good detailed feedback on their behaviour. This was a game developed for Six Sigma training, which is typically done in the classroom. We typically go through case studies and scenarios. But what we did is we just created a virtual scenario. We run a coffee shop. But rather than just creating an out-of-context scenario, what we did was build in actual tools that you use when you're doing Six Sigma evaluation. So we partnered with Minitab, who do the official Six Sigma analysis software, and we put their imagery, we represented it in the game, so that as you're learning Six Sigma, you're using the same software as you would in reality when you're running a project. And that's really important to aid transference. And also it helps the units with self-regulation, because that really aids their learning, really aids their stickiness. Creating a safe environment is also really, really important, because go back and practice, replay things when you make mistakes, all the great benefits of why you might use a game. This was Unlock Leadership, which is a soft skills multiplayer training game for corporates. You basically get stranded on a desert island and you've got to find your way off with very little guidance. When we built this, there are 42 primary learning objectives that we had to achieve. Some very, very basic ones like representing some heritage from the client, all the way through to managing teamwork, problem solving, decision making, coaching, a whole raft of them. But the great thing about this game is that every time you play it, it's different because it's dependent on the people that you're playing with. So the social dynamics within the team change every time. This uses self-reflection. So it's very difficult for a game to judge how good you are at teamwork or how good you are at coaching. We don't yet have the technology, I think, to do that. So what we did was build in a self-reflection. So you judge how your own behaviour went in the game, but then also your teammates judge you. So at the end of the game, it's all anonymous throughout, but at the end of the game, you get a report that says what everybody thought of you. So, which then goes into a face-to-face debrief. Leads to some interesting conversations. We always try to look at replayability in our games as one of the mechanics. Sometimes when we're building for corporates, we have to only deliver an hour of training and that's it because of intercharging in businesses. But when we're looking at education particularly, we always try and build in as much replayability as we can. So this is our business game. It contains a dynamic model which reacts to you running your business for 3 years in the game. So every decision you make, you've got virtual competitors who change their pricing, their marketing, their sales strategy. The average number of times people play it is about 4.3. We know that from our LMS data. But we also use this in a national competition and in international competitions. And we know I don't know if they were the most successful team, but they were definitely the most motivated team, played 98 times. And it's not a quick game to play. So I don't think they won after 98 times, but they really, really tried. And through that, you get sales charts, you get a P&L balance sheet, you get all the data metrics that you would from running a business, which you can save and plot the improvement across each time you play. And in terms of real data analytics, that's absolutely critical to any learning process and also to certification. These images here are from a product called GuideWeld VR, which is a virtual reality welding simulator. And I haven't welded in reality myself, but I've done it in the virtual world. And it teaches you about 80 to 90% of the skills that you need to weld in the real world. And when we're looking at things like welding, looking at activities like that, the material saving of taking all the practice out of the real world into virtual world is phenomenal. The ROI is really, really significant. You don't have all the mistakes, all the metal, all the gases, all the health and safety issues that you have. But the great thing about it is I think you can 10 million, a lecturer can input up to 10 million combinations of welds, believe it or not, that there are that many, into the system, and they can bespokely create a lesson plan for each individual student through the user management system. And not only can they do that, but they get all these different data metrics here about the angle that you're holding the welding gun at, because we have a peripheral, 3D printed peripheral, how close you were to the actual metal, how fast you travelled, and they get all these analytics here, and you can get a percentage score about how good you were. Then you can replay it, so you can see where you made the mistakes. And the lecturer has instant access to that information. So in terms of official certification, so often what we do is we work with subject matter experts in businesses, in schools, and we look at what in schools it's Ofsted or curriculum. In business, it's what are their matrices, what are their learning objectives, and we do that for every game we create. So we've got to ensure that the learning outcomes are visible and transfer. In terms of the wider marketplace, we've been working with City and Guilds as part of their tech back qualification, which it's not quite launched yet, it's due to launch this year. That's going to be teaching business skills to vocational courses, people in vocational courses, so like hairdressers, farming, the non-academic side, but they still need to learn business skills. So they're going to be using our business game to collect the evidence to prove that they understand the business. So that's piloting at the moment. It's going to launch in September, and it's to kind of replace the examination side of the course. So it's a practical experiential element. In terms of challenges and benefits of this, the teachers are actually the biggest challenge that we had to overcome in kind of helping them understand that the game could capture data and could be quite a useful tool, but also to remove some of the fear that they felt. So it's going to replace me, or I don't know how to use this tool. But that actually led to a benefit in that it helped us to create a standalone course. So it didn't necessarily require a teacher or a lecturer to help you through it, so you could do it in your own time, at your own pace. And of course, it helps differentiate Totem, because there's not many serious game developers out there who have achieved accreditation for the formal exam. In terms of wider challenges for accreditation, I don't know, we know about the LMS, the learning management systems, data management systems, in that if you're looking at corporate, they typically use something called score 1.2, which can only track one score, and it's a percentage, and it's out of 100. So if your game design doesn't equate to that, you can't really capture your data. So you only have to export it as a PDF if you can write to the computer, or there's certain elements and difficulties that you have to overcome, but the benefits of capturing those granular decisions really outweigh those technical challenges, in my opinion. So thank you very much for listening, and I have to do this. I have to give a little plug for a book that I wrote last year. I wanted to write a book that was incredibly practical about what people are doing out there in the industry right now. So it's packed full of case studies from organisations that are using games and their experiences. And the reason why I wanted to do that was to try and help the sector, help everyone developing games, and help people who are looking to buy games, to try and speed up some of those decision processes. So you can read about all the mistakes that other people have made and read about what they would do next time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen. We have some.
Yes, I'm someone researcher here at the Disruptive Engineering Lab. I'm going to be a little bit controversial today, whereas our first two speakers have talked a lot about technology. I'm going to do the opposite and talk about why technology may be bad in game-based learning. So one of the things that I always hear and always kind of disappoints me a little bit when I've been doing this job is this statement right here. Let's use this technology. It's innovative. The students will love it. It is the Jar Jar Binks of my world, basically. And I kind of get to that point where I think, oh God, here we go. Because the conversation usually says, oh look at this really, really shiny technology. Look at the VR 260. How can we use it? I want to get it straight in. And the problem with that is that they want to use this technology straight away without even assessing why it is good for the learner. And I have a bit of a problem with this. And I'm not against technology at all. I love technology. I have spent my career developing serious games and gamification solutions for technology. And when it's done correctly, you get digital literacy, international reach, integration of new learning styles, which is of course very important, access to additional resources, and can be used to make some really fun puzzles. AR is great. I love AR. I just want to get in there and AR on. But the problem is that when it's used incorrectly, you get this. So you get user disengagement. Well, you created this thing, but it's not right for the learner, so therefore they don't want to know. You get unachieved learning outcomes. So you focus so much on the technology that you've not actually achieved what you set out to do, because you focus all about how you're going to make this work instead of what it's actually going to be teaching. Expense of unused technologies. Now, there's nothing worse than a cupboard full of really wonderful technology which is just sat there doing nothing because, well, no one really wants to use it anymore. It's moved on, and we don't need to use it. time. One of the biggest problems is the time taken to develop these solutions. Unless you have a large team working solidly on something, it could take you X amount of months just to get the thing going, and then implementing it and support, and then it may not even fit the user's needs after that point. Access to professional skills, programmers and designers. So sometimes people are really creative, and I hear a lot of teachers and facilitators say, "Oh, I kind of like the sound of this, but I need all these additional skills to get this off the ground." So yeah, there's a problem there. And higher barriers. So I think what Helen was just talking about, the perceived ease of use. How you're going to get it in, what is the actual benefit for using it, and the problem shooting after that point. So what I've been thinking about recently is how can we address these problems, and how can we kind of turn game-based learning and gamification into something that is more accessible and easily achievable by just normal Joe. And it got me thinking about the old days. Oh yes. And there's a little bit of a competition. Those people in the lab, they've seen this already, you are exempt. But if you name this popular TV show, I will give you a prize. Do you say? There we go. Ah. You get a prize. Did you get a prize?
It just cards.
So for those, I'm sorry, that was maybe a little bit of a British thing, so I'm really sorry. But the Crystal Maze essentially was, what, early 90s TV show that was all about basically following Richard O'Brien, this guy around here, around these different time zones. And in these time zones, there were puzzles, and you get locked in with people, and these challenges that you had to kind of face together. And it was great. When you watched it, it was really more about people working together to solve something rather than the technology. And it did have technology in it, but it just wasn't the focus. And then I thought about this one. This one's a little bit harder, so if you can get this one again, I'm sorry, it's a British thing. I should have thought about this. But this is my all-time favourite thing. You also do. So yes, Nightmare. And what Nightmare was basically another step up from Crystal Maze. So basically, it was about a more technical D&D. So you had a group of kids who would, and this was the game master or dungeon keeper, and basically they'd get together, and one kid would have to wear a bucket over his head and be guided by the other teammates around on green screen technology. So again, it became about working together and how do you solve these challenges through collaboration and teamwork and these kind of things. And I thought, oh, this is so great. I want game-based learning to get back to this more playful thing where the technology enhances what we do rather than leads what we do. And then I thought, well, maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm a bit old school. Maybe I should just shut up. But then I took a look at what was going on in entertainment games. And I realized that actually, when you take a look at what's out there already, it's starting to reflect this naturally. So where we went one way, where it was all about the technology, we're kind of bringing back slightly so that it's more about the collaborative and how technology can support us. So we have a rise in board games, but particularly blended board games where apps are used to support the game itself. We have choose your own path games, so particularly with some of the more telltale games, digital games. We've got, I like The Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us, and it's all about player ownership, player choice, and these kind of things. Escape rooms, so escape rooms which are where you get locked into a room with a group of people, and then you have X amount of time to solve these various puzzles, and it's all kind of themed around a story that's very physical. Interactive stories. So do you know that they've actually made Crystal Maze in London? It's back, people. And also, they have Nightmare Live. It goes around in theatres. You can go and you can watch it. I know. Yeah, it's back. These things are back. It means that we're kind of making a more a kind of nod to the 1990s. It's great. And the mystery company, again, this is my new favorite thing. This is where you sign up to a website and you get sent basically these packs which are full of these physical props, and you have to do puzzles, and it comes the story. So, ignoring. Oh. No, that's in the wrong place. Sorry. So I thought about then how could we get this into what we're doing here? How could we start looking towards a more interactive gamification approach for games? And what we did is we developed an educational escape room. We developed a prototype to just kind of put out some feelers to see if any facilitators were actually interested in using this as part of their practice. And what we did is we had a theme centered on the bomb and a hostage situation. And the idea was that it was split over 2 rooms, and we put half the team in there and half the team in there, and they had to work together to solve the puzzles that were in the room. The only way they could communicate was via 2 laptops, which were hooked to Skype. So we're using technology to support the process, but it wasn't the focus. And we made this video. If anyone is interested, I do actually have the longer stuff. It's hilarious, by the way, to watch people do it. But so in this this prototype, basically the learning objectives was for them to develop their soft skills, and it was really, really about communication. That was the focus. FYI, no one completed the challenge, but this was okay. Everyone kind of it almost made it better because everyone left and they were talking about it for ages, and I had people come back to see how the other groups were doing, and I thought that was a really great talking point. But as you could probably see, we had technology. We had the screens, and on the screens there was a password protected site that they had to get into, and various other things. So we were using the technology, but it definitely wasn't the focus. It was the people involved and how they worked together to solve it. And yeah, there they are. Sad. They didn't escape. But so the process we used to develop that was this. So this is the escape framework. How we developed this particular interactive game, and what we're using to develop subsequent ones that we're doing now. And it looks at, I think, what António and Helen were speaking before, like looking at participants and, looking at who is it aimed at, and then, the learning objectives. You've got the theme, the puzzles, the equipment, the evaluation at the end, the learning objectives. How do you make sure that, the people have actually achieved what you set out to do? And where we are now is, now we've done the prototype and we've said, right, this looks like people enjoyed it. Let's see what else it can do. We've currently got an ethical hacking game in development, which is going to run across a year. So it's going to run across the ethical hacking course, and it's kind of in a more solve the mystery approach. But that is a blend between the physical. So it starts off very physical, and a company is going to send things out, a company, and then it kind of comes back now to a virtual world. So it'll be really interesting to see how this blended approach meets the objectives that we're trying to do. So I realise I've not really talked about certification, but that's my random ramblings for today. But my final thoughts is really that game-based learning doesn't need to be technology-led; it can be technology-enhanced, and we should really be looking at how do we move towards a more playful approach of games. And yes, you don't need to be an expert in programming in order to get learning into your practice. It's really just about the creativity behind what you're trying to do. And finally, to focus on the fun and the play that we really want in serious games, because when we do focus too much on the technology, we do lose the play. So just to kind of sum that up. So thank you.
Excellent. We have seen 3 different perspectives, and they are actually, in my views, they are all one, because we are looking at a hybrid approach to teaching and learning, and we need to find ways to certify it so that we can use it as part of the assessment within a formal setting. Because at the end of the day, higher education or formal education, they would require some sense of what evidence can we provide in terms of the learning itself. So, right, so I'm opening the floor to questions. Any questions?
Best question, because we can take one back.
I can start with one question.
Sorry, you mentioned that you plan to incorporate some sort of smell in the virtual world and maybe some sort of feedback. How do you plan on achieving that?
So we have one project going on, which is to get multisensory environments. The idea is to create the integration of the senses that are most important. In a way, what we try to achieve is to have perceptually equivalent scenarios. So to be able to integrate all the senses that are required to perform or to take an action. For instance, a fireman in a fire, he should have information that is required to take an action. It doesn't mean that he has to be 100% equal, but he has to have the smell, if that's important for that taking the decision, or the feeling of the heat. So to incorporate that. And for that, we have different devices. For instance, for the smell, typically we have air compressed devices and odors that can put smell on your nose or remove it. And then it gives it also, you have heaters and fans that can create, but that is integrated on a scenario builder that creates all this integration. So it's both hardware and software to be able to create the integration to have perceived perceptual equivalent scenarios for games.
I've got one question for Helen. I'm quite interested to see how did you guys manage to break the barriers with teachers in terms of getting involved, using the system, so on and so forth?
Really, it's a matter of show and tell, really. So when a teacher is a little bit cautious about it, well, they say that my kids will just run riot in the class, so they won't respect it, or they'll just treat it as something silly. Or we say just let us have a go. We can show you how they react, and then typically within the 50-minute classroom time, then they're converted because they see immediately the kids just engage, and they just like Charlotte's been to see it as well, and we've got videos that we use as part of our marketing, but they see the change in their students, and I think firsthand that's the big argument we could ever use to convince teachers that it's valuable, as well as the continued discussions afterwards. Those moments that we call them, they practice at home. Getting students to log in and play at home. And the team that played 98 times, you never get students reading a textbook 98 times or doing anything like that. So yeah, those are usually the things that we try to make.
So are the teachers sort of allowed to create their own lesson plans using systems?
Absolutely, because the game uses dynamic business model. Teachers can ask their students to play in a number of different ways. So we have a 5-week course that we provide, as well as e-learning, lesson plans, PowerPoint decks, everything. So it's a whole package. But you could ask your students to play through in teams and individuals, to gain the highest market share, to produce the best quality product but with the most revenue. So there's lots of different ways you can target it. And again, it's as flexible as running any business, really. It's just, what do you want to get out of it?
Any other questions?
I want to be controversial too.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the slide with the Pavlov dog.
Oh, yeah.
So game design as a way to make people do stuff. That's strong. I know it's a joke,
Yeah.
of course, but I think that in many cases these serious games and gamification also on a meta level teach compliance, which of course is necessary in a medical environment, on workplace security, for emergency situation, it's absolutely necessary. But in education context, it's a bit of a dangerous proposition. So on a more practical level, I wanted to ask, did it happen to you that some students used your games, or even your games, in a way that was different from the expected, or even completely opposite to the basic purpose that they had?
Yeah, we always find people are very clever and they use the games in ways we never expected. I think you can never account for every user behavior, every type. So in our multiplayer game, an example would be that it's all puzzle based. It's very similar to Crystal Maze and Nightmare. In fact, we drew a lot of inspiration from those sources. And we originally intended it to be played at your desk, so that you wouldn't see anybody else's screen. So you've got 3 other people in the world. But we found that people would be setting up conference calls to talk to, because it's all instant messaging. So they would get on the phone and they say, who are you? What are you doing? What can you see? And then that wasn't quite good. They started doing screen sharing. So they set up conferences using their corporate systems to actually see. So people are very, very good at finding ways around the challenges that we've set them. And when we set up the business game, we never thought people would use it in the way that it's used today, these international competitions amongst schools. And I think that's great. There's the user-generated content side of things. And, essentially, the game, or a serious game, is a context for learning. And if someone can find a different way of learning through that game, then that's absolutely fantastic.
It's really interesting that those interesting things around it. Yeah, that's really interesting. You're right, I don't think you can ever account for the people in general and what they're going to do.
But I think to your point, I think the danger comes when you start using game mechanics to change behavior in different ways. And that whole the dark side of gamification, I think, is a moral question that we haven't quite answered as an industry. But it's a bit simpler when you're looking at a training need in a business or a specific learning outcome for education. But yeah, it's definitely something you've got to be aware of.
Yeah, I think that it's quite an interesting area. Eric is one of our PhD students. Is actually looking at serendipitous learning. So they are trying to see what other things can someone learn from a piece of thing. So I think it's quite interesting to see how, as a designer, you can create design serendipity. So you create something that people would discover Easter eggs. If you know games, is all about the Easter eggs, the things that you discover, which is not necessarily related to the game itself, but it is something that you discover. Wow, this found something which is not really part of the game, I think.
Yeah, there's great cases like Mario Kart being used for maths. And Nintendo's being used to teach kids care and things like that. So there's some great stories out there about how you never intended to use it.
Any other questions, thoughts, views? Well, you can continue these conversations, and if you need any contact details from 3 of our speakers, come and see us. And we are also working on different ways of supporting staff in terms of the use of technology, trying to contextualize and create narratives around the use of technologies. And as an example, what Sam was presenting today was actually us trying to see how to create a hybrid space in teaching and learning by using technologies as enablers and not necessarily the thing that would drive us in terms of creating our lesson plans and the things that you want to teach. Yeah, so come and have a chat with us, and we are happy to share our experience and provide some support. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the three speakers, and António is going to be with us for the next 4 days. And Helen, are you based at the Technopark?
We're at Dutch Porto.
At the Walk.
Yeah. Yes, just.
But yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.